All right, hello, hello. Give this a few minutes to let some folks come in. Okay. All right, we are going to get started here in just a minute. Let me give a moment just to let some folks get in. All right, so we're going to get started. Thank you for those who are here and watching this. Thank you for those who are on the replay and watching this. I'm super excited to be here and to share and to kick off this 4-part series on redefining introversion and talking about what it means to be an introvert, because I feel like collectively as a society, we don't really fully understand what it means to be an introvert. So for introverts, that means we are running on this outdated operating system that isn't really true for us, which means that we are navigating life thinking that we need to be something that we're not, which can really cause a lot of stress and anxiety and discomfort. So it's really important to understand what it means to be introverted so that you can thrive in this life and in this world and in the world that you live in. So I'm Vicki Cook. I'm Vicki Regina, and I am a certified mindset coach. I work exclusively with introverts. I'm a hardcore introvert myself, so I do understand the struggles. And my mission in working with my clients and even just speaking in general is to help introverts learn what it means to be introverted so that they can really understand themselves. Because I like to help my clients, and again, even just introverts in society, feel confident in who they are and confident in what they bring to the world so they can show up as themselves in the world without having to try to pretend to be more extroverted. And that can be really, really challenging to do if you don't understand yourself at this fundamental level. So that's why I really get fired up about talking about this, and why I really wanted to put together this 4-part series, because as I talk to introverts, I talk to a lot of introverts, but as I talk to introverts, I realize that there's this basic understanding of what it is isn't really there. So I wanted to start there, and then we can build on top of that. So today, what we're going to be talking about is the common accepted misconceptions about introverts that I hear over and over and over again. And these misconceptions are what causes us to see ourselves in a negative light and to feel like we are limited. And it's what causes people who aren't introverts, extroverts, it causes them to also see us in a negative light and to see us as, well, you just need to get over that. You need to fix it. You need to overcome it. So I'm not going to be getting into some of the more specifics of what it means to be an introvert yet. I'm going to do that next week in the second part. But today, I really wanted to start to break apart those beliefs, those thoughts that you may very well be experiencing as well, that keeps you in that cycle of thinking that you need to be more extroverted as you go out into the world. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and dive into the first misconception. And this is one that I hear this all the time. As I go out and I'm talking with introverts, as I go out and I am doing presentations and just, networking. Anytime I say I work with introverts, well, then the introverts always love to tell me that they're an introvert, and we get into conversations about it, which is lovely. And the number one thing that I hear that is a very common misconception is that I can be more extroverted if I have to be. Or another variation of that is I'm more extroverted when when I'm with my friends or my family. I see that a lot, like little memes on Instagram or floating around LinkedIn, where it says, "Oh, when I'm with my friends, I'm super extroverted." I've also heard people say, "Well, when I'm on Zoom, I'm more extroverted, but when I'm in like public groups, I'm more introverted." And the problem with this, the misconception that underlies this, is there is a correlation between being extroverted and being outgoing, or being introverted and being shy. which is not true. Those are not direct correlations, because what someone is actually trying to say when they say, well, I can be more extroverted if I have to be, or I'm more extroverted when I'm with my friends, or I'm more extroverted when I'm on Zoom, what they're really saying is, I'm more outgoing in those circumstances. And that ability to be more outgoing is coming from the fact that you are in a circumstances, or you're in a situation where you feel more comfortable, and which means you feel more confident, which means you can just be yourself a little bit more. You can kind of let the walls down, and therefore you're more outgoing. But you're not being more extroverted, because we're wired, introverts and extroverts are wired differently. I'll get into that next week, but you can't make yourself more extroverted. So it's a misconception to think that. And the problem with that is, when you think about it from this perspective of, oh, when I'm with friends, then I can be more extroverted. Oh, but when I'm out in public, I'm more introverted. And it kind of feels like that. You're reinforcing that belief, that those self-limiting beliefs, that there's something wrong with you, and that you need to change how you're showing up, or that there's this introverted part of you is something that you shouldn't try to be, because it's when you're awkward and not confident, and you feel all weird. And that's not the case. You can be outgoing as an introvert. In fact, when you say that, like, oh, when I'm with my friends, I'm more extroverted, or I can be more extroverted with my friends, that is subconsciously discounting you as an introvert. But if you say something like, I'm more outgoing when I'm with my friends, still an introvert, but I'm more outgoing, it's a more empowering statement that isn't dismissing this fundamental part of you. So the opportunity here is to watch your words. Watch what you say to yourself. If you are using the terms of introverted and extroverted in relation to um, positive versus negative, or this is when I'm really good versus this is when I'm not so good, again, you're just reinforcing those negative self impressions about yourself. So the opportunity is, again, just watch your words, because that isn't what introversion and extroversion is all about. And outgoing is introverts, again, introverts can be outgoing as well. Now, the second misconception that I want to talk about is introverts don't like the spotlight, or introverts will never like the spotlight. This one comes from a poll that I did yesterday on LinkedIn. And I was asking people, I put up 4 different statements, and I asked them which of these feels the most untrue for introverts. And I had things like, oh, introverts love the spotlight, or introverts can be great leaders, or introverts are good public speakers, or something like that. I don't remember the exact statements that I used, but this one was the number one response that people voted on as that felt the most untrue. And that was around the idea that introverts love the spotlight. So there's this misconception that introverts don't like the spotlight, or will never like the spotlight. And that's not really true. If you think about it, there's a lot of famous introverts out there that are in the spotlight all the time, like Barack Obama, Meryl Streep, Elon Musk, Christina Aguilera. That's always a fun one to share, because most people don't think of her as an introvert. And that is, if you think of them, whether you love them, hate them, agree with them, disagree with them, I don't think anybody would say that those particular individuals don't like the spotlight, right? Like I think they probably all enjoy being in the spotlight. So, even myself, I used to avoid the spotlight at all costs. I never want the attention on me. And even now, there's still circumstances where I don't particularly enjoy attention. But there are now circumstances and cases where I do enjoy the attention. And there's something different between introverts and extroverts, I feel, in terms of the desire for being in the spotlight, that is just a little bit different. So introverts don't love attention being on themselves. They don't love to talk about themselves for the most part. Introverts don't want to have to think on their feet in front of everybody. We prefer to be, more prepared. And because we don't naturally seek out the spotlight, we have less experience with it. So therefore, again, we go back to, we have less experience. Therefore, it's not something that we're necessarily comfortable with. We're less confident. So therefore, we don't necessarily pursue it. But then, because society is telling us, well, you're introverted, you're not going to like being in the spotlight, you're introverted, introvert means weird and quiet and awkward, then we don't even see it as something that we can potentially embrace and be good at. Whereas extroverts are never told that you're not going to be good at this, or this isn't going to be something for you. So extroverts can step right into it, get into that discomfort, and learn to be in the spotlight. But I do feel like the premise behind why like extroverts like being in the spotlight versus the introverts who do enjoy being in the spotlight, the reason is maybe a little different. And now I can't speak on behalf of extroverts because I'm not an extrovert, but in talking with some extroverts, but from a general perspective, and again, not saying this is true for all extroverts, but I feel like when extroverts are in the spotlight or they're seeking the spotlight, it's because they want the attention on themselves. They do want, hey, all eyes on me, everybody look at me, and that helps to give them energy and to help them feel more, just refuel their energy. Whereas for introverts, we don't love that attention necessarily on ourselves. But for introverts who do enjoy the spotlight, myself included in some circumstances, it's because it's not about me. It's, and then like I'm going to speak for myself here. It's not about me. It's about what I'm sharing. Like I feel really, really passionate about empowering introverts, teaching introverts what it means to be introverted, showing introverts that there's different ways that they can approach themselves, their lives, to feel more empowered and more confident and not have to fake it as an extrovert. All of that stuff really, really excites me. It's my mission. It's something that I want to like spread beyond me. So it's not about me. So I'm happy to be in the spotlight when it's about that message, but I don't necessarily like being in the spotlight other times. Like the worst thing you could do is like if it's my birthday and at a restaurant, please don't have the wait staff come over and sing happy birthday to me. That's not a good scene for me. But and for most introverts. So that's a different type of spotlight or being in the spotlight, but it's absolutely not true that introverts don't like being in the spotlight or can't be in the spotlight. Now, the opportunity here is to change your thoughts around that and your beliefs, because if you believe that that's something that you're never going to like, or you're never going to be okay with, or you're never going to excel at, then if you are in a position, maybe it's at work, or you are trying to start a business, or there's a cause that you really love that would require you to be in the spotlight, you're not going to give yourself the opportunity to do it because you're telling yourself, I can't do it. Or you're going to tell yourself it's going to be really hard and really uncomfortable forever, as opposed to seeing it as like, well, it's going to be a little challenging and uncomfortable initially until I get more comfortable with it. So when you can see the opportunity as an introvert to anchor yourself and anchor moments of being in the spotlight to something bigger than yourself, then you open up that door to play in that space more aligned with you and your energy. So the other reason that can be really dangerous, if everybody collectively believes that introverts don't like the spotlight, don't shine in the spotlight, aren't good in the spotlight, is in circumstances like at work, a boss may not select you to take on a bigger project because they're like, oh, well, they're an introvert, they're not going to like being in the spotlight, which is again not necessarily true, and it's also damaging for you in your career path. So it's really important again to just think about it differently, think about what might be possible for you, and if this is something where you're like, you know what, I don't have a bigger cause that I want to stand up for, I don't have like this big message that I want to share in the world, I'm not feeling called to do that, then that's okay. It's not something that you need to go explore, but just again, being open to the reality or the opportunity or the potential that being in the spotlight is something that there are many introverts that do it and they excel at it. So just something to think about there. Okay. Yes, unconscious bias. Exactly, Brenda Lee's. It's when we see that you know we come in with these beliefs about what people are or how they react or how they should act or not react, and it's so subconscious, right? We don't even consciously think about it. So the more that we can talk about this and educate people on this, then the more we're going to be able to kind of knock that unconscious bias out the door. And yes, the happy birthday, right? Please don't sing happy birthday to it. Like, what do you actually do? What are you supposed to do when somebody sings happy birthday to you, right? Like, do you just stand there? Anyway, it's very uncomfortable for us introverts. Okay, so the third misconception that I wanted to talk about today is that it is rude or selfish or unfriendly to take time for yourself. Now, I know as an introvert that you know that you need time alone. You know you need time by yourself to recharge. So that isn't the misconception here. The misconception is the belief that it is unfriendly, antisocial, rude, unkind, selfish, any of those things, to take that time for yourself to recharge. Society, again, doesn't understand what it means to be introverted. And so when introverts want to take that time by themselves, it can be misconstrued as being antisocial or a loner. This can be really tricky if you're in a relationship with someone who is who's an extrovert. I've been in those relationships, and it can be really challenging for them to understand that you're not being rude or antisocial if you've had a really crazy, packed, exhausting week, and it gets to the weekend and you want to stay in and binge Netflix for a little bit, or read a book, or write in your journal, or take an extra long bath, or just go for a long hike and do something by yourself. It can be really challenging for them to understand that, because they may be like, oh, well, if you just get out and you go see people, you're going to feel better, when that's actually the last thing in the world that you should be doing in that moment, because your body needs that rest. So society has unfortunately taught us that it's rude or selfish or any of those thoughts when it comes to taking time for ourselves. So because of that, we end up not taking that time for ourselves, which it means we're reinforcing that we can't trust what our body is telling us. And we can't trust what our body is telling us. And yeah, Stephen, it's a huge one. It's totally self-care, 100%, because it's like, I like to say it's like sleeping. Like, having alone time for introverts is like getting a good night's sleep. If we go too long without getting alone time, it's like going multiple nights without getting sleep. And so I would hope that people in your world, if you hadn't slept in 3 days and you finally felt sleepy and you said, I'm going to go sleep because I haven't slept in 3 days, I would hope somebody wouldn't say, well, my gosh, how selfish of you to go take a nap when you haven't slept for 3 days. So it's a very similar thing for us to take that time alone. Because we are our internal processors, we need that space to hear our thoughts and to process all the information that's coming in. Introverts tend to be much more sensitive to what's going on around them. So it's like when we go out into the world, all 5 of our senses are like on like hyper alert, and we're taking all this in, and we have to be able to process it on the inside. So if we're around people all day long and we're taking stuff in, by the time we get home, not only do we need to process that, but we've got to turn our focus inward so that we can release some of that and we can refuel our energy. So it's not selfish, as Stephen said, it's not selfish. It is self-care to take that time. So the priority here, or the opportunity here, is to prioritize that time. It's learning to speak up for your needs and not feeling guilty. And again, society will tell us that it's not okay. I've been in relationships before where I wanted to take that time, and I was dating an extrovert and he didn't get it. And so I ended up feeling guilty. And even now, that was 10 years ago. Even now, my boyfriend that we've been together for 6 years, and he is from day one has always said, if you need time to yourself, you take it. It's not a problem. It will never be a problem. You just tell me and it's perfectly fine. And when I speak up and say, hey, you know what, I need to take time for myself, he's 100% okay with it. And I still feel a little bit of that guilt because of all the years where I was made to feel guilty for taking that time for myself. So it just takes practice, and it takes, speaking up for yourself and setting those boundaries. Which, by the way, if boundaries is something you struggle with, that's going to be my focus for June. So just a little FYI, that's coming. But yeah, so again, when it comes to the third misconception, it's not around the fact that you need the time. It's around the fact that it's 100% okay for you to take that time. All right, so that is, that's just right now, that's just kind of like the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the misconceptions around introverts. I could probably do weekly episodes just on this particular topic and bring up all the other ways that people are that don't understand what it means to be introverted. But for now, I just wanted to start with those top 3. And if you came in late and you missed it, there will be a replay. You can catch those because my the biggest one that I hear was the first one that I talked about. But yeah, the main thing I wanted you to get out of today's talk is just the idea that you can think about yourself differently. That it's when we look at the world through our introverted lens, it means that we get to show up in a different way that aligns with our energy. Because again, we are the extroverted world, this one size fits all has created an outdated operating system. Well, actually, not even an outdated operating system within it. It's created an operating system that's just not true for us. It's the wrong operating system. It's kind of like putting, I don't even this wouldn't be possible, but if you could put a Mac operating system on a PC, which you can't do, it's kind of what this pressure to be extroverted is like for us as introverts. So the objective here was really to help you think about things from a different perspective, see things from a different perspective, and yeah, hopefully that will inspire you to question any of those places in your life where you're telling yourself, I can't do this, or that's harder because I'm an introvert, or I don't know if I can do this. Yeah, boundaries. LinkedIn user, definitely that's a tough one, because it's not just like the boundaries we set with other people, it's the boundaries we set with ourselves as well. So I'll be talking about that next month. But yeah, so does anybody have any questions? Wanted to keep this somewhat short so there was space for questions. If anybody had any, I'm happy to answer questions. And by the way, if you do struggle with thoughts or beliefs around things that you can't do because you're an introvert, or it feels impossible, or it's not something that you're ever going to be able to do, or it's harder because you're an introvert or something like that, I do offer free 20-minute mini coaching sessions. They're called thought do-overs. You come in with the specific thought. You got to come in with a specific thought, because we don't have time in 20 minutes to try to figure out what the belief is. But you can book one of those, and if you come in with that specific thought, then in those 20 minutes, I'm going to help you flip that thought around. Now, it may not be a full 180 degrees, but it will, at the very least, you will have a completely different perspective on it, or it's opened up new doors for you. So if you want to give one of those a try, I always have these available. That's the link. You can book one of those with me, and I would love to help you with that. But otherwise, are there any questions? While you guys are thinking about it, next week, part 2, it's going to be at the same time. I'm going to be going into what it actually means to be an introvert from a biological perspective, because we are wired differently than extroverts, which is why it's unfair for us to be expected to just become more extroverted or change who we are. So I'm going to be talking about that, as well as talking about what you bring to the table as an introvert, so you can start to connect with that and see your gifts that you may be dismissing right now. You can start to see those as benefits. All right, so any questions? Any other misconceptions or things that you wonder, like, is this something that introverts can do? Oh, thank you. I'm not sure who LinkedIn user is, but thank you. We can do a lot in 20 minutes. All right, well, I'm going to be here till 6. So if anybody, just in case anybody else pops in last minute, but if anybody has questions, definitely drop them in. Awesome, Stephen. Thank you. Thank you again for everybody who showed up today. All right, any questions, comments, thoughts? Oh, Flora, thank you. Shy versus introversion. That's a great question. Okay, so shyness they're not the same. I know they get used interchangeably, but they're not the same. I actually was really shy when I was a kid, but now I'm not as shy. But shyness is more of like almost like a social anxiety. There's a fear around being able to, like, there's a fear, like it's fear-based. Introversion is not fear-based. Introversion is energy related, like where you're getting your energy from and being that internal processor, where shyness is more about fear of speaking, fear of judgment. When I was a child and was really shy, like I was so shy that when we went to McDonald's, I couldn't even like tell the teenager that was taking the order. I couldn't even like tell the teenager what I wanted to eat. I'd like have to whisper it to my mom because I was so painfully shy. And the rare occasions where I get hit with shyness now, it doesn't happen often. The difference, I can definitely feel the fear piece, but it's almost like there are just no words. Like I might want to talk and I just feel like super anxious in the moment, and just like my head is just there's no words flowing through. But when I'm just not in a state of shyness and I'm just introverted, I'm totally fine saying something if something comes up and I think of it and I want to share it. I'm totally cool with that. It's just I'm also cool with just not sharing anything because I'm processing things internally. So let me know, Flora, if that helped answer your question. When you don't hit your alone time, you just cracked. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. Such a great point. Yeah, it's like, again, like if we don't get sleep, if we go 3 nights without sleep, it takes us longer to refuel, right? Like, okay, yeah, you might sleep for 8 hours when you finally are past the insomnia, but it still takes a couple more days. It's like jet lag also. It takes a couple more days um, to refuel. It's also like, and I'm going to be using this example in the third part when we get into energy, but it's also like if you think about your phone, when you are recharging it, like let's say it's at 50% and you plug it in, it doesn't take as long to charge it back up, right? But if it's all the way down in the red zone at 0%, it takes a lot longer before you can, before you're back up to full charge. Excellent point. Yeah, yeah. A lot of people think that introvert is shy. It's totally not. And there's actually, believe it or not, there's actually extroverts that are shy because again, it's more of like a social anxiety, just like there are outgoing introverts. So that's why in the first point, if you missed it, that first point, the first misconception, I talk about that, where it's really damaging for us to think about introvert, extrovert in terms of shy, outgoing. So just to check that out if you missed it. Awesome. You guys are fantastic. Thank you for the questions and the comments. Got a couple more minutes. Any other questions that have come to mind? Stephen, you're coming in with all the great points today. When the phone gets to 0, won't let you even turn it on until there. Yeah, totally. Or like my laptop, sometimes it like dies when I haven't had it plugged in, and then I'm like sitting there like hitting the button, like come back on, come back on. So yeah, excellent point. And when we think about that as an introvert, when we hit that wall, I call it the introvert wall. When we hit that wall, I'm done, totally done. I had that happen at Thanksgiving actually. I don't hit the wall that often, but at Thanksgiving, I had a really busy week trying to cram everything into a couple days. And I was at Thanksgiving with my boyfriend and his family, whom I adore his family. And thankfully it was after we ate, but I hit that wall. I just was like done. And thankfully my boyfriend, he looked at me, saw my eyes, and he was like, okay, we're going to leave in just a few minutes. But yeah, it took me the entire weekend to recharge. All right. Anything else? Such good talking points. So what would you guys say, if you're still here, what would you say is the number one thing you might do differently after hearing some of the conversation today, if you feel like sharing? Just curious. Got about 30 seconds. Oh, here we go. How do you explain it to people just because, here, let me pop this up. All right. How do you explain to people just because you're introverted, willing to present or lead? So do you mean that if you're introverted, you're not wanting to present or lead. Is that what you mean? Just want to make sure I understand your question correctly before I answer it. And I'm happy to stay on a little longer if there are other questions that you guys want to ask. So I'll wait to get a little bit more clarification on that one. Despite, how do you explain to people that just because, despite being introverted, you're willing to present and lead? Meaning so am I correct in understanding that because you're introverted, people think you don't want to present and lead, but you're okay with it? Is that the question? Sorry if I'm misunderstanding. Yes. Okay. Perfect. Yes, that is such a great question. And that really goes into the whole misconception, right? So people think that introverts are shy, quiet, awkward. They're the weird kid over in the corner that just wants to like eat by themselves and not talk to anybody. And they think that anybody who is talkative, good presenters, that, oh, despite being an introvert, I'm willing to lead. Yes. And so okay, so I think I'm understanding it. So I'll keep going with what I'm saying, and then you can let me know if I'm completely off track here. So you as an introvert, you know that you're perfectly fine leading. You know that you're perfectly fine, speaking and clarifying your thoughts and sharing, but the other people may not recognize that, which means maybe they aren't giving you the opportunity to do it. And again, that goes back to the misconceptions around what society understands introverts versus extroverts to be. So there's this collective thought that if you are introverted, you're shy, you're awkward, you're not good at presenting, you're not good at sharing, you're not good at being in the spotlight, you're not a people person, maybe even you don't like people. So there's all these negative beliefs around what it means to be an introvert, but ultimately it's like quiet, shy, awkward is kind of the overarching umbrella. So if you as an introvert are perfectly fine with sharing and leading, and others around you think that you're not because you're introverted, it can be a bit of a challenge to try to basically get the mic, right, and to share. So I would hope that it really comes down to like, well, I don't think you have to really explain it, right? Like you just say, look, I like sharing, I like leading, I like presenting, and let your skills, your natural skills in doing that shine, and let them see like, hey, this is not an obstacle. But if you feel like discussing it with them, then that is that opportunity to just explain like, hey, being a good presenter has nothing to do with being an introvert. And that's where you can pull out some of the examples, like earlier I shared some examples, but like Barack Obama, Christina Aguilera, Meryl Streep. I mean, there's a ton. So if you Google it, then you can get some really impactful people who, throughout history and even current times, who are introverts that will support your state. You're trying to explain to them, like, hey, I am, just because I'm an introvert, I'm not limited. That does not mean that I can't present, that I can't lead with and lead with impact. Let me know if that answered the question. I'm hoping I understood that right. And any other questions? Oh, no worries. No worries at all. I think we got there. Hopefully we got there. All right, so we're at time. Again, I want to honor your time. If there is any other questions, I'll give it like another 30 seconds to see if anything comes through. And if not, we'll call it an evening. And thank you. And next week, we'll be back at the same time, and we'll be talking about kind of the science, the biology behind it, which is really fun to start getting into and to understanding why we are the way we are. All right, so thanks everybody. If you do have another question and you didn't feel like putting it on here, feel free to DM me on LinkedIn and let me know. And so I hope you have a lovely evening, and I hope to see you back next week.